Well, joining me now from London is Mike Trace. He's the chairman of the International Drug Policy Consortium and a former chair of the European Monitoring Centre on Drugs. Mike Trace, good to speak to you. Mike Trace, sorry, good to speak to you this morning. Can you tell us, what can the Mexican authorities do to try and stop the drug violence in the country?
Well, this has been a major challenge to Mexican authorities for decades now, and as you can see with the current news, there is still a major battle between the authorities, the legitimate authorities, and the drug cartels. This arrest is a breakthrough in that battle for the government, but it certainly isn't the end of the challenge.
I mean, to use an image, is this the head of the snake? But there are many snakes in Mexico.
Absolutely, and this is one of the problems for the authorities in tackling drug cartels, particularly in Mexico. There's many different organizations that have become enriched through the drug market, and they have many different factions within them. And one of the problems when you successfully achieve the arrest of one of the heads is that the other organizations and factions within the Sinaloa cartel will now fight over the vacuum left by the leader, and that fight usually involves an increase in violence.
Well, Mike, do a Mexican government need to follow the lead of other countries? I'm thinking about Uruguay and changing their drug policy and the way that they actually manage the so-called war on drugs.
Yes, I think so. The Mexican government did make a significant change of direction in 2012. Before that, they took a very militaristic approach and tried to fight an arms race, if you like, with the cartels, and that just led to more violence and more human rights abuses. So they've tried to manage it more in a way of reducing violence the last few years. They've made some progress with that, but the situation is still very difficult in Mexico. Many countries, I must say, including Mexico, are coming to the United Nations now and saying we need to take an entirely different approach, move away from a war on drugs and start talking about taking a more social and health approach that doesn't involve these big spikes of violence and battles and wars between legitimate authorities and organized crime.
And Mike, just take us through then, finally, that social approach and whether you support this idea of sort of decriminalization of certain drugs to try and tackle the drug crime in a different way.
Well, the key change to make, and many countries are already making this change, is to stop penalizing and stop focusing on what we call the little fish in the drug market. What has happened in the war on drugs is millions of users, low-level dealers have been focused on, imprisoned, arrested. And very rarely do the people at the top, the organized crime chiefs, get affected by police action. So the first thing to do is to start to make sure the focus isn't on the millions of little people in the market, but is focused on the really dangerous organized criminals. That in itself is difficult because these are very powerful and rich people, and some countries have said, well, the only way to undermine their power is to legalize drugs and provide a legitimate market for this, so the illegal market is undermined. There's a lot of debate about what the best way is to deal with organized crime, but the one thing we do know is we should not be focusing on the small players in the market. We must deal with the organized crime threat irrespective of the drugs.
Well, Mike Trace there from the International Drug Policy Consortium, thank you very much for now.